This actually gave me a great idea, and I thought I would go ahead and give you guys a comprehensive list of a few, keyword few, pieces of art or mythology or movies or books that inspired the wonderful Lady B. Some of these are direct inspirations for the plot. Others are just things that I was like, oh, you know what? I see a correlation between that. And maybe I want to see if I read this and any of it ends up in the book. Some of these are for volume 1, some of these are for volume 2, and you can play a fun little guessing game about what inspired what or what is adjacent to who. But yeah, happy listening, watching, reading for all the things I'm about to list. To my knowledge, everything on this list is readily available, easy to purchase, easy to find. Some of these things have several variations to them and have been replicated several times because the stories are so good, but let's get to listing. Starting off strong, we have one of my personal favorite works of literature of all time ever, and that's The Portrait of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Next, as previously discussed, we have Dante's Inferno, specifically the story about Francesca and Paolo. Next up, we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, specifically the 1940 vision with Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine, if you're movie fans. This one is out of left field, but basically it's just the story of Bridget Cleary. This is a really great book about the events leading up to her death. There's also an episode of the TV show Lore that's available on Amazon that talks about what happened to her. I love a lot of Grimm's fairy tales. I feel like the whole aesthetic of The Wonderful Lady B is a creepy fairy tale, but specifically the story of Snow White. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte and anything Bronte adjacent. There's a lot of Heathcliff and Cathy in Volume 2, and also a bit of a gender swap with the idea of your beloved showing up at your window and haunting you. Since the book starts in 1911, Korea has only been Korea for a year. Hundreds of years before that, it was Joseon, but there's lots of Korean mythological creatures and fairy tales that are mentioned, one of them being the Yongno. It's a cursed creature that has to eat 100 rich men before he can go to heaven. Very on brand for the wonderful Lady B. Next, we have the Gumiho, or the fox spirit, that also appears in Korean mythology. They are a very, very popular trope in a lot of Korean media. I made mine to run a little bit like a matriarchy. In a lot of East Asian countries, there are different fox spirits, and they're called different things, and they have different facets to them depending on where you go. But in the wonderful Lady B, you might find that they all share a similar trait, or maybe they all know each other. They all hang out sometimes. And last, when it comes to Korean mythology, there's the popular creation myth that the first man was a tiger and the first woman was a bear. If you've been here since the beginning, this one shouldn't surprise you. There's so many movie adaptations of Carmilla, and a lot of them are slutty. My personal favorite one is the Ingrid Pitt one because it is the most slutty. Also, Ingrid Pitt is not only an incredible horror icon, she is an icon in general. Her life was super interesting. You should look it up. Another big inspiration for The Wonderful Lady B, Volume 2 specifically, is the legend of Cuchulainn. He's also known as the Hound of Ulster. He's an Irish warrior that goes on adventures and is famous for his death. He chose to lash himself to a rock and face his enemies as opposed to retreating. The myth of Lilith was a really big inspiration, especially around Barbara's relationship with Robert Gary. I didn't put a picture of her in this slideshow, but also Catherine of Siena, who was a very famous saint. I have a video a little while back that talks about Catherine of Siena choosing pain in the mortal life as opposed to the spiritual one. The idea of anorexia mirabilis comes up again in the second book. Barbara's still like a little bit of a Catholic. She's a fallen Catholic, but you know, she still kind of hangs on to it. And last but not least, The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. I love the idea of people going nuts in empty, huge houses. My favorite genre of art is beautiful rich people suffering in beautiful places. And shockingly enough, I have not seen Saltburn. And anytime it comes up on my FYP, I throw my phone across the room because I've read enough Evil Lenoir to know how it probably ends. That's another person to read just because he's just, I love Evil Lenoir. Evil Lenoir is another one of my favorite authors of all time. I hope this is a comprehensive list. If anybody wants to go out and explore things or reread something that you saw on this list that, you know, you really like and you haven't read it in a while. And for my big Greek mythology fans, the big project of 2024 to drop in 2025 will hopefully be Aphrosyne. So you have that to look forward to as well. Happy reading and happy watching.